So today we did a test run of the performance in front of about 15 year 10s, and these were of course in the age range of the target audience which we were looking to perform our piece to. So the performance today went really smoothly, there were no errors, and we then got some feedback from the year 10s afterwards. There were some good points, but there were also some suggestions which they said that of ways we can improve our piece and make it more relatable, and highlighted some things that we needed to rethink. So the good things that they said was they really liked the facilitation. They thought that was very good. It got the message across. They helped them when us to review like their understanding of what we were trying to say, and if they weren't quite understanding because we were out in the audience, we could talk to them about it and make sure they understood everything that was going on, which was really good, and they really enjoyed that, and they liked interacting with us, and they thought that we seemed very approachable, which is something that we really wanted, to have that connection with the audience. However, what they did say is maybe we should start this facilitation a bit earlier, because there's a big bit at the start which they just watch, where we're showing all the stereotypes and all that, and it's comedic and stuff. But we think if we started the facilitation a bit earlier, we would set the expectation straight away that we were going to have lots of interaction involvement and prepare them for that. Also, it's less just a big chunk of watching where they could potentially switch off and stop listening. Whereas if they're involved straight away, they'll be constantly involved, constantly watching the play and taking it in. Also if we have that interaction straight away, we would instantly create a connection with the audience and appear approachable to them. That doesn't have to be a full. We thought that didn't have to be a full facilitation. Instead, can just be some interactions, which we could do to develop that connection, and split up just the whole big chunk of watching. So some other suggestions that they made of how we could change our piece and improve it was they thought we needed a bigger difference between sober John and drunk John, because they found it a bit confusing about when he was drunk and sober, which of course not we want. So we thought that we needed to pinpoint some aspects of John in the first scene on the Mini Cooper when he's drunk. What we need to pinpoint what things make him appear drunk, and then remove those for when we remove the barrier later. So the next thing that they thought was that the text message that John sends after Holly sends that big paragraph saying all her feelings, and he just sends back a text message saying sorry, smiley face. They didn't think, or some of them didn't think that's what they would put, and that seemed not as relatable to them because they didn't think they'd put that. And of course we don't want to alienate anyone in the audience. So they thought maybe we could have some more text options, or like alternative replies which you could say. It's a difficulty adapting that part of the scene because that text message triggers another scene later on in the play, and it's a perfect example of when John doesn't communicate properly. However, we want to make our play seem relatable, and we don't want to offend anybody thinking that we're being critical of how they reply and saying that's how they would reply, because we're girls, they might take that as us being critical of them and then switch off from us. So we thought maybe we could instead collaborate with the audience and think of a more alternative, appropriate replies for the situation. This not only would identify that this is not the correct, or not a great way to reply, that it doesn't help him communicate, and it isolates John. It helps them think of a more appropriate reply which can help John and Holly and stop and make sure that John doesn't become isolated. So that we'd do that with some interactions with the audience, and that will keep them involved, keep them thinking about this. So the next thing was when we rewinded and we watched all of Holly and John's scenes. They thought that bit was quite confusing, as they got a bit lost in that when we kept rewinding and rewatching. So what we thought we could fix this was have the narrators clearly explain what was about to happen, that we were going to rewind the scenes and rewatch them, and I try and identify where John has communicated, and really clearly really clearly explain that. Also, what we could do to also make it clearer was the narrators title every scene which is happening, and perhaps give a small bit of context just so the audience know where we're at. So, for example, this is the Mini Cooper scene where Holly finds John drunk on top of a Mini Cooper. That gives a little bit of context, kind of titles the scene, and make sure that the audience know where they are so they don't get confused and switch off and stop taking in the message that we're trying to give. So after this, we had a full class discussion about things that we needed to improve and how we were going to do that. So one of the things that came up and that we found that the audience said in their suggestions when talking about who John could talk to was that they mentioned extended family, which is something we hadn't thought about yet. And we thought that was a good idea because extended family, they're not as close to their parents, so they don't need to feel, well, they don't need to have to feel the responsibility. They don't feel the responsibility to have to take immediate action. However, they can just be there to listen, and because they don't live with you, it's not something that you feel as pressured about, because you don't feel because you don't see them all the time. It doesn't feel as such a big, I don't know, sometimes some people thought it didn't feel as such a big thing. It felt like they were just there to listen and support you rather than try and fix your situation for you. However, we did think some people we couldn't say that's the right answer to go, because of course there's no right answer who to talk to, and some people aren't that close to their extended family, so don't feel able to talk to them in that way. So another thing that we discussed was when we kept the answers from the audience, and we facilitate with them. When we come back and we take the answers in and we talk about these answers, we felt like we had to give them the option of whether we should say it or whether they wanted to say it. Because we thought this will take the less pressure out of it, make them feel more at ease, more comfortable. Because when they feel more comfortable, they would be more likely to participate and feel less pressured in this situation. So more likely to just relax and listen to what we're saying. However, we wanted to make sure that we properly encouraged them to say their answer, say their answer rather than us, because ideally that's what we want. We want them speaking out their answer. However, again, we do want to give them the option that we'll do it for them. We also discussed having lots of positive reinforcement, so giving lots of compliments, lots of positive language when they say an answer, because this is more likely to boost their self-esteem, make them more likely to contribute, make them feel more at ease, more likely to contribute again, and it also increases a better connection between us and the audience, as they feel like, as we feel more likeable to them, and as we're giving them such positive feedback, lots of positive encouragement. We also thought that it would be important for the narrator to announce the point that has just been said afterwards to the whole audience, so that everyone can hear it. No one is confused about what's just been said, and sometimes we find that the audience will switch off until they hear that something was a good answer, and then they would want to know what the answer was and realise that they'd missed it, and that can be quite frustrating. So I thought if we say, oh yeah, okay, that's a really good answer, and then announce that out. It makes everything clear and it makes sure everyone's heard it. We also thought that we needed more banter, more interactions between the cast. As this, again, we thought puts the audience at ease, helps us establish a connection between them, and because it humanises us, makes us seem more approachable and less like actors, more human. Something else we thought was kind of we need to improve on was the pace of our performance, because we found that the pace was quite slow in our performance and therefore lacked the energy that needed to captivate the audience's attention. Because it wasn't quite as exciting and didn't capture the audience's attention straight away as we were hoping, because the pace was too slow and some of the transitions were too slow. So we just think that that's okay. We just need more rehearsal to try and polish that off and make that more slick, smooth and quick. So something we also discussed that was we thought a bit of a worry our performance is that there's a lot of behaviour surrounding alcohol, and we wondered if that made our piece too directed at a certain kind of lad, or certain kind of male, and that would mean that it wasn't relatable to everybody, and therefore we didn't want to alienate anyone in the audience. We also thought that because our performance was to ages like the year 10s and 11s, the year 10s were less likely to drink than year 11s, and therefore that wouldn't be quite as relatable behaviour to them. We want that kind of relatability because that leads to connection with the audience, and therefore they're more likely to participate and more likely to take on the message that we're trying to give. We thought we should probably address this and perhaps identify, instead of changing it, identify the alcohol as a risk-taking behaviour, like Mr. Bashir said, and make that clear that not everybody will show their frustrations and the pressure that they're feeling through that certain risk-taking behaviour, and that actually there are other risk-taking behaviours which people might show instead, and that this is just one example. This will make it clear that we're not just directly targeting one type of male. We're trying to be as inclusive as possible. So we also thought that we wanted the narrator to, because in the scene where John is on the Mini Cooper and we're removing the barriers, we found that in our previous performance we were presenting them with 4 barriers to remove and only removing 2 of them, which became a place of confusion for the audience, as they weren't sure why we were only removing 2 and not the 4 that they were presented with. So we thought that we needed the narrator to establish that we were going to remove alcohol and we're going to remove aggression and swearing at the same time, because these two kind of go hand in hand, and swearing usually comes when the person is being aggressive. We also thought that we remove alcohol on its own, and we also thought this leads on to needing to remove peer pressure, because before we were saying that there was peer pressure making him say these things to Holly, but there was the friends weren't part of the scene, so we thought it didn't quite make sense, and we ended up not removing peer pressure at the end when we've been presented with this as an option. So we decided to add the friends into the Mini Cooper scene and creating a very boisterous, overwhelming atmosphere of saying like laddish comments, acting drunk as well as John, and making it hard for John to communicate because he's been egged on by his friends and doesn't feel comfortable in this environment to communicate properly with Holly. So we decided to remove that, and we thought that was a nice thing to create such an atmosphere, as it just really makes it seem very overwhelming and like a big issue. So one suggestion that we got from the audience was to add music when we went out and interacted with the audience. This stops it being silent when we're interacting with them, and we thought that this would a good idea because it makes the audience relax a bit, puts them at ease. It's not such a pressured environment, asking for questions. I also thought it could cue when we had to go out into the audience and interact with them, and when we had to come back. So there wasn't any hesitancy or gaps, and we all knew exactly when we were supposed to come back and go out. So it appears more organised, and therefore we appear more knowledgeable and more trustworthy. And therefore they're more likely to listen to us. So after this big discussion, we decided to rework the first scene, as we had about an hour left. So we first started with this right at the beginning, where Charlotte does that awkward entrance with the podiums, trying to, because she's quite small, trying to hold these big objects that's very hard to bring in down the aisle. So we decided, we first did it to make it for the comedic effect. However, it didn't quite land as we wanted to. We didn't think it was as comedic as we thought, and instead just kind of created an awkward, uncomfortable atmosphere. So we thought maybe this could be a point when we got the audience involved straight away, because we decided we wanted the audience involved a bit earlier. So we thought we'd have a bit of an interaction. So maybe not quite facilitation, but a bit of an interaction with the audience, so we could create that connection early on. So we thought that Charlotte could ask some boys from the audience, or a couple of boys, to come help her carry on and move them, and that's kind of involves them straight away, asking what their names are, which we could use later on in the play if we wanted to kind of create that connection with them. And the audience would find that more comedic, with people they know having to carry these things on. It also prepares them straight away that they're going to need to participate in the play, and that this is a kind of performance where we interact with them and get them to participate with us, and that prepares them straight away so they know what to expect when we ask them to do that. We also decided to change the part when we bring on the chairs, and then the other side brings on the fake penises. So instead, we decided to each bring on our own chair individually. We're still having the two groups on each side of the stage, but come in like a V formation into our position. We thought that we could, while we're doing this, we could have kind of like more banter between the cast, having like smug faces, kind of make a bit of competition about it, putting him down, but still keeping that kind of insyncness while seemingly keeping that relaxed kind of movement, relaxed, stereotypically laddish movement. We also thought, because it created more banter between us, made humanising us a bit, but it also was faster and more efficient. Therefore, the whole that start bit, we thought it was too long, and it condensed that down a bit. We also thought we needed to make more of a bigger thing of the penises. As we have these penises that we just shoved down our trousers straight away, I want to make more of a bigger thing. Want to have them in hand, do some movements with them, showing how proud we are of them, like showing them off to the audience, kind of having that interaction with the audience, showing them off to them. This breaks taboo straight away, so it's like, this is what we're going to be talking about in this piece. It's also thought it was very comedic if we're showing off these fake penises as we have. It's embarrassing, but if we keep, they might find it embarrassing, but if we keep being very confident with it and showing these off, then it doesn't make us seem embarrassed, if you know what I mean, or cringy. It seems more comedic, breaks these taboos, and shows that we're okay to talk about these subjects which are typically taboo. So we also decided to have these 4 stereotypical lad movements once we sit down, because we found before that we ended up sat down too early, and there was just some beats of music where we kind of sat doing nothing, waiting for our point when we can do that motion to our crotch with our hands at this particular beat of the music. So we created these 4 stereotypical laddish movements to fill up the beats, so we're not just sat doing nothing. And it also, But what also was nice about it, because we're not doing it quite in sync, but it's all kind of the same movements. It creates a very visually interesting image, and kind of really introduces that stereotypical lad that we're trying to give off at the beginning of the show. So we also thought that we would speed up the interactions between the lads. So when we get up off the seats, come forward, do an interaction, pick up a chair and move off before we do that competitive part. We thought we needed to make that a bit speeded up. It was too, because we're trying to condense down the beginning a bit, make it all a bit quicker. So we thought we need to speed that up, and so that everything's a lot more quicker. The audience don't switch off when they're watching, and it just very high energy, keeps the audience attention. So we just needed to practice that, making that all a bit more slick and a bit more quick. So something else we did was because we thought we edited the social pressure montage, because we thought that again was a bit too long, so we cut down that a bit to took away some of the scenes that we did for that montage. So the little clips. We also decided to change the clip about the clothes, because we didn't think that was as relatable as we decided to change that to the gym culture, and we thought that was a more relatable subject to students of this age. So we wanted to talk about, like, because it's still on the theme of body image, but it's more about the muscles, how they look that way. So we kept that body image issue, which again we think is very important, just adapted it. We brought that gym culture, which Sue wanted us to talk about, because she thought it was particularly prevalent for our society nowadays, and we think that was good and a very good idea and very important to talk about, as yes, it is very prevalent in our society, and that there is a lot of stigmatism around male body image if they do not go to the gym, because that is kind of it's become very expected of them, and very a pressure to have that kind of body shape, the very muscular body shape. So yeah, we have a lot of a lot of things to think about from the suggestions which we got from the target audience, and we thought we got a lot done in improving the start, and we think that was a very good start in enacting these improvements. We still have a few more to rethink, 2 more things to rethink, and a few more suggestions to try and enact and try and adapt our piece a bit to make it more relatable and increase that connection with the audience.